Welcome to Ducks Dash, the University of Oregon show on Dash Sports. I'm Izzy LaRue. Here with me is Michael Strite. Let's get into everything Oregon sports. So, Michael, let's talk about the football team before we get into basketball. I know the title of the show is COVID concern, so we'll definitely get into that later in the show. But right now, I want to talk about the Oregon football team. Michael, what do you think about our new DC?
Yeah. First of all, Izzy, I missed you. Kind of like the basketball team. You've been off for a little
Yeah.
bit. We've had our off time, but we've had a lot happen with the basketball teams both now having their COVID issues, and then the football team's got a lot of action. First thing I want to say is I jinxed myself so hard the last time we talked about football because I said one of the greatest things that Oregon has going for it is a full season, a full off season that should be normal with all three coordinators, the head coach and both the coordinators staying the same. Because that doesn't happen for Oregon that often. I mean, I thought it was going to be the first time in a while that they were going to be able to keep everybody. And it's also because I thought the whole coaching carousel was figured out and done. And I was wrong because Boise State was still hiring, and Boise State is where we stole Andy Avalos from. So it's only fair that he goes back there. Not sure what kind of a head coach he's going to be based on just my vibe of what kind of personality he is, what kind of leader he is, but he's definitely a good dude who's going to be he knows how to run a defense, so he's going to be tough to replace. And speaking of replacements, Mario Cristobal had to get busy again, replacing another coordinator, Tim DeRuyter from Cal. It's going to be interesting. I'm curious what his vision for a defense is, whether how different it is. Because when we got Joe Moorhead in here, when we got the Joe Moorhead offense plugged in, it really was like night and day, and it was so interesting to see the way that Joe Moorhead calls plays, what his philosophy is for offense, and the stuff that he was interested in pulling out. I don't know if it's going to be that much of a big swing from what the Tim DeRuyter defense is, but I'm curious to see what his philosophy is, how that's different from Andy Avalos, and whether better suits this Oregon defense that is going to have high hopes and is going to have some high expectations to do pretty well next year.
Well, the one thing that Oregon has going for with their new DC, DeRuyter, is that he's known for turning defenses around. And even though the previous season, the football team, they had the best defense in the Pac-12, this latest season, the defense was a major issue, and we talked about it all season long. And it's also the reason why they lost so many games too, not to mention the offense. But I think one thing Ducks fans can get excited about is that when DeRuyter arrived at Cal, their defense was ranked about 127th in scoring defense and 125th in total defense. And a couple of seasons later, in the between the 2017 and 2020 seasons, Cal's highest ranking scoring defense was 22nd in the country, and total defense was 15th in the country. So you look at that, that could be a big bonus for Oregon. And when you talk about all the players that they have, all the recruits coming in, and he's also talked about how he wants to choose one linebacker to focus in on and make the leader of the defense. And Michael, I think we both know who that player is. That's going to be Noah Sewell. I
Yeah.
mean, he was the best defensive player for Oregon last year. He had so many tackles just as a freshman. He had so many plays. And now when you have a DC that's looking for one guy to make him be the leader of the defense, I mean, there's no other way that he should be really excited, Sewell.
Yeah, Noah Sewell is a fantastic candidate to be the leader of the defense. What's interesting is when you get these freshmen that have really breakout seasons that are really impressive, it's their transition to sophomore year. You expect them to take a jump, you expect them to get even better, or at the very least to still be really dominant. But you also you're really curious to see what the leadership comes out. Whether they start to morph into being one of the vocal leaders of the defense, one of the spiritual people that rallies around. It was interesting to see that with Kayvon Thibodeau because Kayvon had a weird start to this season, ended up turning it around and looking really, really good. Still was the sort of Kayvon Thibodeau that we expect to be a top 10 NFL draft pick when he does come out in the draft next year. But Oregon's defense, like you said, was really in a slump. And a big factor of that was that it didn't feel like it had its leaders. It had lost Thomas Graham. It had lost Javon Holland. There was a gap there that maybe they filled with talent, but they couldn't really fill from a leadership perspective. And Kayvon Thibodeau just didn't feel like he was rallying the defense or that they were, riding behind him into battle. And that might be a different story with Noah Sewell. Noah Sewell strikes me as somebody that now that he's getting comfortable, if he gets a full off season, he could be somebody that is an absolute wrecking ball for Oregon and is the Troy Dye that they were missing last year. And a lot of good linebackers play for Oregon. A lot of good linebackers are going to be on the roster, but they didn't have that one linebacker that would be all over the field making tackles and that you would absolutely call the leader of the defense. So when I think of Oregon winning that Rose Bowl 2 years ago, it's Justin Herbert and Troy Dye standing next to each other with roses in their mouth. And these are the two seniors that really were just basking in the glory that were leaders for this team all year. And you didn't really have that last year. You didn't know who the defense exactly was rallying around. They were fun. They were talented. They figured it out, but they didn't have that core piece. And I'm really excited for Tim DeRuyter, like you said, what he does to revamp a defense. I think Mario Cristobal made a really great choice, especially with lacking a lot of options in some places. He went and got a great guy, and I think it's going to bode well for Oregon's defense. I think it is going to be a bounce-back year for Oregon's defense nonetheless. I definitely expect them to be better than they were last year, which is all you can ask.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how the defensive line will do next season because you look at the secondary, the DBs. I mean, you have Ron McKinley, Mikael Wright, you have DJ James, and then you're going to have another corner stepping in too. The secondary, they're pretty much taken care of. I think, Michael, you and I can both agree DD Lenore kind of held back the secondary because I don't know what it was, but it seemed like he'd have some really good plays, even a few picks, but then he'd also get burnt for a couple of touchdowns. So, I mean, that just held back the secondary. And then you look at the defensive line. Going into the season, Cristobal was saying, I'm excited for the defense this year because this D-line, that's going to be the focal point of our defense. They're going to be making plays all game, all day, and they didn't really show up. I mean, Kayvon, he's being double-teamed, triple-teamed all season, and you can't really do anything against that. So I'm interested to see what DeRuyter does with that defensive line because it looks like he's going to get the linebacking core corrected. The DBs, they're going to take care of themselves because the talent's off the charts, and their in-game experience has only increased these past 2 seasons. So I'm just interested to see what they do with that defensive line.
Yeah, and another thing that we got to talk about, and it's going to be a talking point, maybe it won't even get talked about enough, is how much turnover this Oregon program sees on a regular basis. So I just went and looked up what was the last time that Oregon actually got to keep both their offensive and defensive coordinator and their head coach from one year to the next. And that was 2015. In 2015, they had Mark Helfrich. Defensive coordinator was Don Pelham. And offensive coordinator, believe it or not, was Scott Frost. I did not know Scott Frost was an Oregon offensive coordinator. That's pretty awesome. And that was the same group from the year before. And every year since 2015, so I guess that's 6 straight years in a row. Yeah, it's going to be the 6th straight year in a row that Oregon comes into a year having to deal with something new on the coaching front. And you're seeing Andy Avalos as well. Keith Hayward, I believe, is going to be following him to Boise State. He's another huge piece on that Oregon defensive staff. We all, we believe in what Mario Cristobal is doing, but at the same time, can't deny that turnover, that replacement is bad for a program. It is not something you want. You want that stability. And the last time that Oregon did have the same coaching staff for 2 years in a row, that 2015 season, they finished number 19 in the AP poll. They had that well-known loss to TCU in the Alamo Bowl that Oregon fans, I'm sure, do not want to talk about.
Well, let's talk about something that Oregon fans have been talking about all season so far, and that's the QB battle. Michael, who do you think is going to be the starting quarterback? Because we all know Anthony Brown, Tyler Shuck, they both announced that they're coming back this season. So, what does that mean for this QB position?
Wow. It's interesting. I was so programmed into a normal year for Oregon that I thought Anthony Brown's gone. He's a senior. He's graduating. But I forget that pretty much everyone that wanted to stay could stay because of this whole pandemic. The NCAA's just given a free year of eligibility to everyone. Um, so it's also funny because all of these seniors that you would just expect to be moving on had to actually put out statements saying, yes, I am going to go to the draft. I am going to try and do something in the NFL. I am leaving the program. And it was like, yeah, of course you are. You're a senior. But it was interesting because they did have the option to stay. So it had to be an announcement. And Anthony Brown is back. So now you've got a quarterback's room with Anthony Brown and Tyler Shuck, who we both got to see plenty of. We both got to see struggle quite a bit last year. Robbie Ashford, Jay Butterfield, and I believe Ty Thompson, who is now just coming in as a fresh recruit, is going to be the true freshman quarterback that also very good, very high remarks, very hyped up. You've got a stacked quarterback room, and that's a good problem to have. You've got a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of different options to go with, and a lot like that's just so much competition for a training camp. I mean, how do you even do that in practice, right? Like, how do you even see what all of these quarterbacks have in a practice situation? That is a lot, and you just got to split up reps so much. And so where my brain goes is to who's transferring, and it's a tough one because we live in a college football landscape where quarterbacks that don't get picked to be the starter just hop in the transfer portal where they can go somewhere else and compete somewhere else. It's more common that a quarterback, if they lose the starting job, especially in a position that like Robbie Ashford or Noah Butterfield would be, if they are competing against each other and they're both the same class, that I don't expect both of them to end their careers as Oregon Ducks. Obviously, right? One of them's gonna go find something else to do, and I am Tyler Shuck loves being an Oregon Duck, and I'm sure he would love to be the Oregon starting quarterback. But if he doesn't get to do that, is he going to be happy just being the bench quarterback and say, I'll wait for my time? Maybe I'll get to play. Or is he going to say, no, I want to be a starter somewhere? And is he going to hop in the transfer portal, right? And then what is they going to do with Anthony Brown? Is Anthony Brown really got a shot to be the starting quarterback, or is he going to be more of a, goal line package type quarterback where they Joe Moorhead draws up some plays for him, but by and large, you just see him come in for one or two plays at a time. It's a lot. It's a lot to process, but that's where my brain goes: is who's actually going to stay on this team, and how's the quarterback room going to look in the middle of the season, for example.
Yeah, Michael, all those reasons that you just gave to me right now, I feel like this is a really bad situation for Oregon because you look at it, they have all this talent. Now they have to make the decision about who's going to be our guy. Not only for this season, I mean, you could say for this season if they choose Anthony Brown, but for the coming seasons, because if you think about it, we've been talking about, I said it, Oregon, they need to get that QB position correct because they need their Heisman caliber quarterback. That's what this Oregon team is missing.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at all the college football playoff teams, they all have Heisman caliber quarterbacks. Now, Oregon, will they get that? Will they choose it? I don't know. But then you also look at it too. Will they get the defense right? Well, they got a new DC. All right, well, you look at the offense. I mean, Chris Ball, you saw the offensive line. They were phenomenal. They're keeping everyone, like all our offensive weapons except Cyrus Habibi-Likio, who is in the transfer portal. So you look at it, and then who's in his place? Another running back who's done phenomenal for them in the Pac-12 championship and in their bowl games. So I just look at it. They just need to get this decision right, and if they do it, I hope it's Ty Thompson or Jay Butterfield. I hope it's one of the younger guys. I know. I mean, like you mentioned it, they could use Anthony Brown in some packages, especially made for him. But I totally think that Tyler Shook should transfer out. Maybe he transfers to Arizona. I don't know because he's from Arizona. He likes that state. Maybe
Yeah.
he finds somewhere where they need him. But I just feel like Oregon, they need to just move on from these older classmen and focus on the young recruits that they brought in and told them, we want you to play for us.
Yeah, and you want to leave the door open for a dramatic turnaround, but Tyler Shuck doesn't feel like he's that Heisman caliber quarterback that Oregon has. And there was some excitement, and he's not really that bad of a quarterback, but his confidence tanked throughout the year. I mean, it was just a downhill slope, which is not what you want to see. And he was playing his worst football at the end of the year. And that's why we both sat here and said, that could be the last time we see Tyler Shuck play quarterback for Oregon. That could be the last time we see him on the field with the Oregon Ducks. You know, he may be transferring. And we still feel that way. Personally, I'm on the Robbie Ashford train. He's an Alabama guy. I think the state of Alabama produces a lot of talented players. So I think he chose to come all the way out here to the West Coast. I'm excited to see him. I want him to win the job, and that's purely based on just random stuff. I haven't watched much of any of them. We both expect Ty Thompson to probably redshirt, but maybe he's, obviously the door is always open for him to be the world beater, the best quarterback in the room, and then he gets it, right? But we expect not to see much of him, and it'll be – so, if we're not too high on Tyler Shuck. We're not, expecting to see Ty Thompson right away. So it boils down to Butterfield and Ashford, right? And that's going to be the new quarterback battle between them, who both got to sit and watch from the bench this year and think about, what it's going to bring next year. And another thing that I do want to touch on is what happened at the University of Alabama. And Alabama had a Heisman caliber quarterback this year in Mac Jones. But Mac Jones wasn't very hyped up, wasn't super he was a great recruit out of high school, but he wasn't somebody that burst onto the scene and started immediately. Mac Jones was the third string quarterback on an Alabama team and knew that he would have to wait and wait and wait, and then in his senior year, maybe he would get to play, right? But he studied. He sat behind Tua Tagovailoa. He sat behind Jalen Hurts. He got to play a little bit when Tua was injured and looked good, but not great, and sort of a down year for Alabama last year. And then he finally got a full season as the Alabama quarterback. And, well, he got to be the quarterback for one of the greatest college football offenses to ever exist. And he got that Heisman recognition. He got to be the first team All-American quarterback ahead of Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. He was the quote-unquote best quarterback in college football. That was all remarkable, and that was because he was patient. So I'm curious what it's going to be for these Oregon quarterbacks. Is Robbie Ashford or Butterfield going to be happy to be the backup? Is Tyler Shuck going to be happy to sit on the bench? When they communicate who is that starter, it's going to be really interesting to see who says, all right, fine, trust me, I'll get to play. I'm going to be working. I'm going to get out there. And who's going to say, boop, transfer portal, see ya. I'm going to Arizona to try and be their quarterback, because I bet it's a lot easier to become the Arizona football starting quarterback right now.
Yeah. And you talked about it too. I mean, Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, those guys are two Heisman candidates. Right now, Oregon, they don't have a single Heisman candidate, so it's kind of harder to sit on the bench, right? I'll be like, oh, maybe I'll get my time my senior year when you look at it, thinking like these guys aren't better than me because they're not even the top 10 quarterbacks in the conference, where the conferences even have that many teams. Yeah. So, yeah, I just look at it. It has to be one of the younger guys, because Oregon, they got to think long term now at that position. They can't just think about who's going to give us the best results now, because even then it wasn't Shuck or Anthony Brown. They both, Brown had a phenomenal game in Pac-12 Championship, didn't show out in the bowl game. Shuck had a great start to the season, disappeared as the season went on. So you just got to look at it. You have to move on from these upperclassmen guys, and you have to focus on the people who you brought in and told them, I want you in Eugene. I want you to play for the Oregon Ducks. I want you to represent us. I want you to lead our offense. So I'm just excited to see who they choose, and maybe it will be Jay Butterfield. We never know. But Michael, let's go on to another thing about this offseason that Oregon has to address. And Michael, what will Oregon have to address this offseason?
Yeah. So we got a long off season. I think it benefits Oregon a lot to get a normal off season. The key for me is that this is going to be the first year where Oregon really has some of the pressure starting to build up. And last year, because of the short season, because of the quarterback situation, a lot of people were like, it can be a rebuilding year. It's okay. They're extremely young. The year before that, I think people forget how incredible and insane it was that Oregon did win the Rose Bowl. Now that it's happened, everyone was like, yeah, that was great. They're a great team. But if you talk to people throughout that year, especially after the Auburn game and after the Arizona State game, stuff like that, people were like, well, maybe if we're good enough to win the Pac 12, that would be perfect. Like, it was a dream season for Oregon to win the Pac 12 and then go win the Rose Bowl in the way that they did. And so there wasn't a lot of pressure there. There was obviously pressure on Justin Herbert that season to, do something for his Oregon legacy, which he ended up doing. But the team itself didn't have that bar. This is going to be the first year in a while for me where Oregon has that bar that they need to be the Pac 12 champs. It's going to be a disappointment if they are not the 3-time Pac 12 champions. And everyone's going to come into this season with Oregon as the game that's circled on the calendar, the game that they want to win more than any other game. And it's going to be a fight for Oregon every single week. They're not going to get the luxury of starting slow. The college football playoff talk is going to be relentless, both from us and from everywhere else. Everyone's going to be talking about, is this the college football playoff team this year? And, what are their chances now? And what are the chances that a Pac-12 school? It's like, it always feels like such a draining conversation that I kind of want to just bottle it up and say, look, if Oregon runs the table, if they go undefeated, sure, or if they lose a game early in the season and then they crush the rest of the season, sure. But Oregon right now, you got to just be happy with fighting for that Pac-12 championship, being the North champion. As we know, Washington's going to be good. Washington State might have a rebound. Stanford we expect to be good. It's going to be a fight to claim that North. Oregon State might be on the rise, honestly. Oregon State continues to be fledgling, but maybe for the first time in many, many years, we'll see an Oregon State squad that is really fighting for a spot in the North. There's a lot on the horizon for Oregon, and it's going to be weird to watch them in a season where losing is unacceptable. And losing is going to be a lot more unacceptable from that fan base this year. It's going to be a little bit different of an environment.
Yeah, you can even make the argument that last season there's pressure too. I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely put pressure in saying that they need to win the Pac-12 championship title, or else the
Yeah.
season's gonna be a bust. And they barely found their way through it with Washington not being able to play due to COVID. And so now you look at it, yeah, there's definitely a lot more pressure this season. I mean, think about it. When was the last Oregon team to get back to back to back Pac-12 championship titles? That was way back when with Marcus Mariota. And now you look at it now. I mean, Marcus Mariota, he was a Heisman quarterback. Oregon, they're about to do it with 3 different starting quarterbacks in each year. I mean, that you don't really hear about that unless you're talking about schools like Ohio State or Alabama, where they have kind of a high quarterback turnover, just because, like you mentioned, those are the type of schools where a lot of seniors start at quarterback because they're just waiting their time because there's other great quarterbacks in front of them that get drafted high. But now, I mean, you look at it, definitely could be different quarterbacks starting for Oregon. And so, I mean, we already talked about they need to get that right. But also, what I do want Oregon to do, they need to get the offense right in total. I mean, they have a whole entire offseason now with their OC, Joe Moorhead. And so whoever the quarterback is going to be, they're going to have a deep understanding of this offense and all the audibles that goes with it, all the play actions, all the routes, the option routes, all the little they're going to learn every little detail about this offense that's going to make them into a great quarterback. So that's what I'm excited to see. And that's what whoever the quarterback is going to be, they need to understand this offense like the back of their hand. They need it just has to be imprinted in them because if Oregon's going to do well this year, the offense is definitely going to have to show up and show out because if they don't, they're not going to win games. I mean, you saw it in their losses to Cal, to Oregon State, to Iowa State. Offense didn't do much those games.
Not help.
So they just need to figure that out.
You talked about that Marcus Mariota, Chip Kelly run, where they were the top of the Pac-12 for 3 straight years. That was the first time they've ever done that, and that was sort of this. Oregon fans will tell you that, especially in recent Oregon football, that was the top of the mountain. That was the peak. And now Oregon is knocking on the door to do that again. And it won't be with Marcus Mariota, but it's going to need to be with pretty good play from the quarterback position. They're not going to get away with another season that we just saw from the quarterback position. They need that quarterback to be a stronger part of that offense. They need a playmaker that is doing more. The good news is I am such a big fan of Joe Moorhead. And I watched Tyler Shuck in those first 3 weeks when he was on it. And that offense was scoring points like an incredible, pace. And Tyler Shuck was running the ball and, RPOs were just clicking. And I was floored by how good the play calling and the design of the offense was by Joe Moorhead. Maybe it's because I was so conditioned to what a Marcus Arroyo offense had looked like, but Joe Moorhead blew me away with what a smart offensive coordinator he was. And honestly, that Pac-12 championship game, that was a game that I give to the coaching staff. As much as the Oregon coaches might get, ragged on for being great recruiters but bad when it comes to in-game coaching, they won that Pac-12 championship with a defensive game plan and an offensive game plan that were phenomenal. So the coaches really carried that through, and they won that game with like 120 passing yards and yet 4 passing touchdowns. And what that tells you is that those quarterbacks were struggling. They barely could throw the ball in the second half. And yet, when it came down to the goal line, when it came down to within the red zone, there were some incredible plays drawn up. And there were just plays that left people wide open. And there was something designed by Joe Moorhead that was phenomenal. And where this whole spiel is going is that if you get a quarterback that is really, really talented and is a true playmaker and is exactly what Oregon needs to hit the next level in this offense, it is going to be just nuclear how incredible and how high the ceiling could be. So maybe we could save this clip. We'll book it for the future. If Oregon finds the quarterback that they need, this quarterback married with what Joe Moorhead likes to do, the stats are going to take us back to that Marcus Mariota era. I think absolutely we're going to see the same kind of Oregon offense that Oregon became known for a few years, just dropping 50 points a game.
Well, we'll definitely have to clip that, Michael, because I want to hold you to that for next season.
They need a quarterback, though. They need somebody that actually can play quarterback.
But we're not enough football. We're in the basketball season. So, Michael, let's start off with the men's basketball team. They've only played one game in the past 3 weeks. How do you think they're going to do in the month of February?
Yeah, this is uncharted territory for us. We got spoiled by Oregon football. They pretty much played almost all their games, and they had 0 COVID issues all season. And the only time they had a game postponed was somebody else's COVID problems, and that ended up being the reason Oregon got to play in the Pac-12 championship. So as far as COVID, Oregon football did a phenomenal job, and Mario Cristobal said that was one of the reasons that he thinks they were, able to come out on top as the champions still, was that the discipline with the COVID guidelines and with staying healthy was an important factor to just what kind of attitude this team was going to carry into the year. I think he said at the beginning of the year, whoever handles this COVID stuff the best is going to be the champion. And he was right. So we got spoiled by that. And now we're sitting here with two basketball programs, both Oregon men's and women's basketballs, that have games now canceled, postponed. Well, not canceled, but postponed, and potentially they could not, get played if COVID continues to be an issue. Postponed is always such a weird position because I think me and you, Izzy, we've gotten, in this COVID world, we've gotten so acclimated to something first being postponed and then it gets moved and then it never happens and then it gets canceled later on. So we don't know if these games are going to get played. We want these games played because we were so excited to see Oregon against the best of the conference. And now they've just been sitting around for a while. I mean, one game in 3 weeks is really a slump, kind of an off season almost. So what are they going to do in February? We have, as much as this is uncharted territory, we've seen what happens when these teams come right back, fresh off of, being out for a while. This has been happening all year, so we can see what these teams play like. And in some cases, they are rusty, and in some cases, they're fine. It's like they haven't missed a beat. So I think it boils down to what do you think Dana Altman is doing with the squad and how these players are treating the downtime. Because we talked about this last 2 weeks ago, but are these Oregon players going to sit back and say, this season's a mess, whatever, I'm just going to chill? Or are they going to really push to say, we're going to watch so much film, we're going to try and get even better, and we're going to, use this off time really, really efficiently, right? And so it depends on what kind of leaders that Oregon team has. It depends on how Dana Altman talks to them about what's been going on. Big mystery, but I think it's still going to be a good February for Oregon basketball.
You mentioned that when teams come back from COVID, they do okay, but I'm kind of worried for this Oregon team. I mean, not for the whole month of February, just when they come back, maybe their first two games when they're supposed to play Washington State, which I don't know if even is going to happen because of their COVID situation. So think about it. The last time they played a game was January 3rd against Oregon State, and they just dropped the game. That's all you can chop it up to. A lot of missed shots. They looked really rusty out there, and they just could not pull off the win. Yeah. And then you're looking at it, the next game that they might play will be February 11th against Arizona State. And we know these Arizona schools, they're always good. They're always looking to knock Oregon off. So, I mean, I'm just worried for the rest. I mean, you look at it, you can talk about Colorado, Utah, Stanford, Cal, and Oregon State all you want again. They'll do fine in those games. I'm just worried about the first 2 weeks of February, if they even play this week. And then if they don't, they have to go to Tempe and play against Arizona State. I don't know how they'll do in those first two games back, whether it'll be this week at home or next week on the road in Arizona. It worries me because of how they fared against Oregon State.
That's true. We didn't talk about the fact that they did sneak a game in there against Oregon State, and it was a Civil War game, and it was a disappointing loss for the Oregon men's team. It's like you said, they just came out and played sloppy. And I was thinking ahead to say, well, Dana Altman's teams are good in February. These seems like a good group of guys that is going to treat this off time really well and, watch a lot of film. But we did get a glimpse of what this team plays like fresh off, this defeat. So, with the limited amount of games they're going to have in February, you're starting to change my mind, Izzy. Perhaps this team does figure it out. I think they find something. They figure out what kind of team they want to be, and they play like a top 25 team in the country, firmly come the end of the season. But maybe that waits till March, right? Maybe it is in March, right around the conference tournament, that they got to figure it out. We've seen Oregon teams in the past that have been really sloppy and really messy and inconsistent for the whole year, And then right at the conference tournament, you're like, oh, this is how they want to play. This is a good team. Maybe that's what we'll get this year. Maybe it is going to be February. And like you said, it doesn't help that they got to play the Arizona schools, that they got to catch up and play UCLA twice, I think, because they've been dodging playing UCLA, and UCLA is sort of the top of the conference right now. Pac-12 is crazy. It's got a very normal pack. It's kind of what you expect from the Pac-12 the last few years in basketball, is that there's no top 10 squads. There's no dominant forces that are going to rule the conference. There's just a lot of tough teams to play, a lot of teams that are going to give you some headaches. And Oregon, I expected it to be pretty rocky, actually. I think it's here's the thing. I've gone back and forth in just this segment, Izzy. You've got me all messed up, whether they're going to be good in February or whether February is really messy. And that's the thing, is that I think they're going to be losing games like they did to Oregon State. The way that we just saw, they're going to lose games just like that. And you're not going to know when, and it's going to be, all over the place. But eventually they're going to find it. And they're going to find a moment where you're going to see it in a game. Maybe it's a game against UCLA where they grind out a 5-point win, and you're like, okay, this is the team that could make a tournament run. They found it. So I think we're just going to be waiting until they find it. These Dana Altman squads, they always click at one point, and I think we're just going to be waiting how long it is until they click. And that's more of a guessing game. That's totally up in the air. For the time being, I think what I'm looking for in February is whether they are grinding at the end of games. We're going to talk about women's basketball in a moment, but that's one of the most positive things about women's basketball, is that they fought so hard at the end of games, and they grind. Even in games that they lose, they really are just fighting all 4 quarters. Men's basketball, that's also been the story for them, where even in their losses, it's been a close game, and they've given themselves a chance at the end. And Oregon State, a little bit more of a dud, that they just kind of totally were flat. But that's what I'm going to watch for, is against these top squads, are you going to get run over? Are you going to lose by 15? Or are you going to lose by 7 in a game where, you kind of had a shot there in the last 5 minutes? That's a big deal for me. It's going to be a big difference how they lose if they do slip up against these really good teams.
Yeah, my whole deal with this month, or even just the rest of the season, I mean, they're going to do well. They're not going to do great. They're going to drop some games just because of rustiness, and not because you think about it, they might not, like I said, play till the 11th, and the last game before the Oregon State game was January 9th. That's literally not playing. That's only playing one game in a whole entire month. I mean, that's unheard of in basketball. So you kind of mentioned it. My focus for this team is the Pac-12 tournament. It really is. They need to, as long as they figure out at the end of February or going into the tournament, if they figure out there and they win the tournament, they have a spot in the tourney this year, the NCAA tournament, March Madness. So I mean that's my focus right now for them. That should be, I mean, they should be focusing on every single game. But I mean, long-term goal, you want to make the tournament, and to make that, I mean, where they're at right now, they have to win the Pac-12 tournament in Las Vegas this year. So I think that maybe that's where their focus is. Maybe they're not looking at game to game. Maybe they're looking at it from their perspective and just a broad point of view. So we'll see. But I want to get into this next topic, and maybe we'll get our answer. Who's the leader of this men's basketball team? Because since Payne Pritchard has left, really his shoes have not been filled at all, playing wise or even leadership wise. And we talked about the football team last year too. They didn't have really any leaders offensively or defensively, and that's why they dropped those close games. And maybe that's why Oregon basketball, the men's team, are dropping these games too, because they don't have leadership.
That's a great point, Izzy. This is a giant question mark for Oregon, is who is the leader. It was really interesting to see Payton Pritchard last year, because he had spent 3 years being an important piece in the starting lineup, and a facilitator and a passer, but not really the alpha of the team at all, not the leader. And in some ways, in his junior year, especially when Oregon sort of figured it out right at the end of the year, a lot of people were calling for him to be more of a force and, take more shots, be more of a problem out there on the court. And he wasn't doing that, but he found it at the end of the year. And it was in the Pac 12 tournament, he broke out. And this was the last time that we got to see Oregon in a full Pac 12 tournament, as last year was canceled. He was on fire for just 4 straight games, and it was a beauty to watch because Oregon fans were really scratching their heads. Like, they were watching Peyton Pritchard play that way and just going, what? Like, that's Peyton Pritchard doing this? And then he spun that into being just the leader and the alpha and one of the best players in the country in college basketball last year, which was mind-blowing and really impressive and fun to watch as somebody here in Eugene. And, of course, that's going to leave a vacancy. And what I'm curious is who's out here leading the Oregon Ducks in points. So I've just pulled up a few of their last sort of conference games, the few conference games they've played. We're going to go through who's, in these games, who is scoring the most points, taking the most, right? You've got Eugenio Marui and Chris Duarte in one game where they both had 14. You've got Eugenio Marui again leading the Ducks with scoring. You've got Chris Duarte again leading the Ducks, and Eugenio Marui's in second. You've got that tough loss against Cal where Chris Duarte scored 27 and Eugenio Marui scored 18. Then you got a game against Utah where, it was Chris Duarte and Eric Williams Jr. And the most recent game against Oregon State, guess who? Eugenio Marui, and surprise appearance from Jalen Terry, who played 21 minutes and scored 13 points. Jalen Terry, the freshman guard out of Michigan, Mr. Michigan basketball, got a little bit of action there, which was interesting. But we go through that, Izzy, and there's an answer that starts to pop out. It's Chris Duarte and it's Eugenio Marui, who are pushing this team to those victories. When they win, it's by narrow margins, and it's because both of those guys are scoring. So this is a really unsustainable way for Oregon to play basketball, which is both Eugene and Chris have to have great games. They have to be shooting the ball well. They have to score. Otherwise, the offense is not coming from anywhere else, right? The offense is running through the two of them having good shooting nights. It's not going to last, and that's not where you want to be if you're Oregon. But for the moment, they are the leaders of this team, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with you. When I was writing up this question, the first person came to my mind was Eugenio Marui, and I honestly I think that's the leader right now. And I mean, no knock to him, but I feel like the hole that Pritchard has left has still not been filled. I mean, he's a great player, he's a great scorer, but you want to look at it leadership wise, he doesn't have that same tenacity, that just something about him where it just gets all the players around him and elevate their level of playing too. And we talk about it, those players that elevated their gameplay, Chris Duarte, Will Richardson. And those two guys, Will Richardson, he's been out with his hand injury, and Duarte, he's been forced into a kind of leadership role that he's not as used to. I mean, he's a guy that he's a spot-up shooter, let's call it what it is, and he's great at that too. There's nothing wrong with being a spot-up shooter. And I feel like it's just it's weird for him to be that leader of the team. And you look at Eugene, when he came on the scene, I mean, when I was looking at that Missouri game, he scored 31 points. I was like, wait a minute, who's this guy? Like, he literally came out of nowhere. And since then, he's been leading the team in points, and he's averaging about 16.8 a game. That's almost 17 points per game. I mean, that's insane for this guy to be a first-year starter. But, I mean, yeah, you look at it, they don't have that leader, so that's why they're dropping these close games, and that's why they're having to rely on Eugene and Chris Duarte, because those are the only guys who are generating points for them. And the rest of the players, like you mentioned, Eric Williams Jr., he went off against Colorado, I mean, he's the guy that's going to get you the boards. He's the guy that does the dirty work in the paint for you.
Yeah.
He's not going to be that leader that Pritchard was. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Honestly, I thought it would be Will Richardson, but like I said, he's out with a hand injury. So I mean, we might see later in February when he returns. Will he be that leader that Oregon so desperately looking for?
Yeah. What is he going to bring when he comes back? Because nobody's going to fill that Peyton Pritchard hole because it was, one of the top scorers in the country, but the offense is just missing.
Yeah.
It's just, and so I've pulled up, the stats from this year, and I'm going to look at just the minutes played. So here are the 6 players that have by far the most minutes so far this season for Oregon, right? We got Chris Duarte. He's shooting 45% from 3. He is the offense of this team, and he's the key to, like, if he can be knocking down threes, if he can be playmaking and dishing out some assists, it's all flowing from there. You've got Eugenio Marui. There's a lot of pressure on him to be the leading scorer. He's sitting at 17 points per game. There's a lot of pressure every game for him to, get into the 20-plus points per game and score for this team. And who else do you got? Eric Williams Jr. leads the team in minutes. Like you talked about, really good defensively, really good on the boards, 6 rebounds per game. But he's outside of that one game where he tore it up against Colorado, under 40%. And he's taking almost as many shots as Duarte and Omarui. So he has been the third offensive option for Oregon, but it's not working, right? That's where the offense is falling off, is somebody's got to be consistently, good on the offense. Duarte and Omarui are consistently good, but neither of them are crushing it in the way that Pritchard was. And if either of them have an off night, somebody's got to step in to fill the gap and score points. And Eric Williams Jr. has not been doing that most of the time. Amari Hardy has been quiet, barely scoring any points. He's been a lot more of a glue guy defensively, trying to get it done, but he's been really disappointing statistically. I mean, it's just been flat out a rough year for him so far, given the amount of minutes he's played. LJ Figueroa is somebody that Oregon players are very excited about potential-wise. He's got 6.5 boards per game. His percentages look good. I think that's where Oregon needs to find more leadership. I think LJ Figueroa, if Oregon clicks, is going to start scoring a lot more points per game and start getting a lot more looks. But he's had his injury issues as well, so good luck there, right? And then you have Chandler Lawson, who has had Chandler Lawson, who we thought was going to step into a more of a starting role, get to play a lot more this year. He's somebody that is also, the potential's there for a really good performance, but he's just been stuck in like a 6th man role where he's played and he hasn't played very impactful minutes, and he's been solid when he's out there, but Oregon fans kind of expect a little bit more from Chandler Lawson, right? And after that, you've just got a lot of randos, right? You've got Jalen Terry. You got Aaron Estrada. Both of them, Dana Altman's got to try and reach out and see what they can do at this point. And these are guys that, Dana Altman doesn't want to have to play in tournament time just to see if they're going to have a hot hand, right? He wants to stick to that core 6 we talked about. And he wants that core group of 6 to be all playing to their best. And right now, something's missing.
Definitely. And maybe we'll see it click sometime in February. Maybe we won't. We won't find out till we get to see them play again. But let's talk about another team that's dealing with their own COVID issues, or not their own, but yeah, their games got postponed. That's the women's basketball team. Michael, will they be ready for the second half of the season, which is February?
Will they be ready for the second half? So let's put it into perspective. They've looked really good. They have some incredible shooters. They have a lot of talent on this team, and they've had some health issues here and there. Sedona Prince, most notably, who, if Sedona Prince is on, she is the best player on this team. And it was when she wasn't available because, it's tough. She's really got some nagging injury issues, and it really is tough to watch because you want to see her just go out and play, recklessly, right? You want to see her go out and be a force. And even if she's out there, it's tough to watch sometimes because she's playing gingerly. She's worried. She's gone through a major leg injury. She's got ankle issues this year, and you want to see her be able to just play and with a lot more confidence. But when she plays with confidence, holy moly, is she a problem? I My parents watch Oregon women's basketball. While she was injured, I was saying Sedona Prince. I've only gotten to watch a little bit from her, and she is scary with the things that she can do, passing wise, shooting from the free throw line, inside moves, playing defense really ferociously, and just being freakishly tall. Right, literally tied for the tallest player to ever play for the Oregon Ducks. And when she finally got to play a little bit, she's been carrying this Oregon team through the last few games that we actually got to see them play. And both my parents were like, "Whoa, Sedona Prince is a problem." And I was like, "That's what I've been trying to tell you. This is a different team, and it's a different team when she gets to be in the lineup because everybody gets to slide into more comfortable positions. Niara Sabali doesn't have to guard the big, right? Lydia Giomi gets to come off the bench more. Erin Boley doesn't have to play in the post as much. She gets to be more of a flex, right? She gets to hang out around the three-point line more. When Sedona Prince slots into that lineup, everything comes down, behind that sequentially, and everybody slides into a more comfortable role. And you see an Oregon team that is just different when she's playing. So how they're going to do in the second half, will they be ready, boils down to Sedona Prince's health. And I don't expect them to tear through this second half, even with a healthy Sedona Prince, because they're going through these growing pains, and they're a really young team. This is a team that has 2 seniors, right? 2 seniors and basically 2 juniors, and the rest is all freshmen and sophomores. This is a team full of babies, and it's been really impressive to watch how good they've played defense. And I'm gonna let you get a word in because I'm going on to different topics here. We're not used to doing an hour-long show, so I'm starting to get a little delirious here, but
you're good.
It's been awesome to watch the Oregon women's basketball defense be as good as it is, because that's something that, from a young team, the fact that they are scrapping and the fact that they are playing defense good, really, really good, some of the best in the Pac-12 week to week to week to week, has been awesome. And if Sedona Prince is healthy and if the defense is good, I have full confidence for Oregon by the time they reach the tournament.
Yeah, right now I'm looking for the second half of the season. I'm just looking at the 2 weeks from February 8th to February 19th. That 2 week span, they're going to play Arizona, Stanford, and UCLA. Those are the 3 games that they've dropped earlier in the season, and those are the 3 ranked Pac-12 schools. Yeah. So I'm looking at it right now. They want to get their get back, and they have to get their get back if they want to do well, not only in the tournament, but in the Pac-12, in the NCAA tournament as well. I'm just looking at just broad perspective again too with this team. They have to at least win 2 of those games, and I think the best 2 that the 2 games that they're gonna win is Arizona and UCLA. I don't see them being Stanford, because even though that Stanford game was close,
yeah,
and Stanford team is the best in the country, and they're the best in the country for a reason. That's because they learn from their mistakes. So in that last game where they almost lost to Oregon, they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, okay, what were the mistakes that we made? Okay, what can we do better defensively to make sure that Niara isn't eating in the paint the whole entire game, that she isn't getting all those boards, and that we're not leaving Jazz open at the three-point line. So I look at that. Stanford, I don't know if they can beat them. I don't think they will. But that Arizona, especially that Arizona game where they lost by 16 double digits, they're going to want to get their get back and look for them maybe to give them their own little maybe 15-point win or something like that, because they remember that and they want to make them feel how they felt after the game. And UCLA, after losing to Stanford, because like I said, I'm predicting them losing to Stanford, they're going to want to bounce back, because no way this team's going to lose back-to-back games twice in one season. They already didn't want to do it once, but they're definitely not going to do it twice. I know head coach, he's not going to want that at all. So, look, otherwise than that, the season should be fine. I'm just looking at those 3 games right there.
Wow. Well, I think it's less important how they do in this regular season for the rest of the way through. They've lost the Pac 12 regular season title, and we got to give a big round of applause to the Pac 12 in general because the Pac 12 is so stacked, so incredibly competitive that when we talk about playing Arizona, UCLA, and Stanford in 3 consecutive weeks, these are playing top 15, top 10 schools in the country. You get no breaks in the Pac 12, right? And they've lost their chance to repeat as the regular season champions, which definitely is a bummer for Oregon. They're now focused on the tournament. When you get to that tournament, you're going to have to beat 2 out of these 3 teams, right? You're going to play somebody pretty good in the quarterfinal. You're going to have to face either an Arizona, a UCLA, probably a Stanford, because if you're looking at the way that the conference shuffles out, Stanford will be the 1 seed, Oregon will be the 4 seed, right? You're probably going to have to upset Stanford in the semifinal, and then you're still going to have to go to the final and beat an Arizona or UCLA. That's probably how the tournament shakes out. So you got to beat 2 of these squads back to back to win the tournament. And this team has to take a pretty big leap. I wouldn't say a big leap, but they got to take a leap from where they are to be able to, hit that stride. And defensively, they're where they want to be. Offensively, they're still looking. And Kelly Graves said, we're going to find it. We're going to find this offense. We're going to keep trying, and we're going to figure it out. What he's happy to see is that this team fights so hard every game. They grind out these games. Even when their offense is totally flat, they make the game close anyway by scrapping, and they fight to get something interesting in the fourth quarter, or they really push in the second half, regardless, right? They've been pretty solid in second halves most of the time this year. And I think they're going to play – what I want to see is that they fight in all 3 of those games, Arizona, UCLA, Stanford. I don't care how the result is. I think as long as the game is close at the end and you can tell that defense is fighting still, that's fine with me. I would expect them to lose 2 out of those 3, maybe even all 3 again. And that would be really tough, especially if those games are all close. But I'm okay if they lose all 3, as long as they pass the eye test and they're still, playing really good defense and they're still making it a close game. If all 3 of those games are close, I would expect them to pull out 1. It'd be kind of a bummer if they lost 3 nail biters. But, as far as this regular season is concerned, it's just, learning and growing ahead of the tournament. And I think this team could be Stanford beaters. We both agree that they could hit a level where they're going to upset Stanford and they're going to give a real tough Stanford in the tournament, right? What they got to do to get there? Well, they got to find some offense, and they gotta still get over some tough losses and get through some humps.
Yeah, and we will definitely see that later this season and later this week too after their 2 games got postponed. But that is it for me and Michael. Thank you for joining us today. Make sure to follow us at Dash Sports TV on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and check out our website too at dashsports.tv. Make sure to catch our bi-weekly shows Sundays at 1. Thanks for joining.